This video is brought to you by Squarespace. On the 5th of May, 2019, the Jeremy Kyle Show would be suddenly cancelled after 3,000 episodes, following the tragic passing of a guest in an episode that would never be aired. News of this incident spread like wildfire, with one question being asked.
You are one of the most disgusting people I've ever met in my entire life. Run along, little boy, because nobody's going to go anywhere near you.
How was this show allowed to be on air for 14 years? Today, we will explore the Jeremy Kyle Show. To tell this story properly, we need to look at who Jeremy Kyle is. Jeremy Kyle was raised very wealthy. His dad was in fact a secretary to the Queen's mother, and a young Jeremy would attend a private all-boys school. Now, Jeremy Kyle is a very charismatic individual. It would be his personality that would get noticed whilst he was working a job as a salesman selling advertisement space on radio. Presumably, his bosses would hear him talking on the phone in the Jeremy Kyle way and pick up on his way of really getting inside someone's head and his unique grasp on psychology. And so he became a radio presenter. A very good one at that, working on many different stations and winning awards. But with all the talent and the charisma that Jeremy Kyle undoubtedly had, he was yet to break into television. But then Jeremy Kyle's life would change forever. ITV had had a new TV show idea. They needed to replace this show called Trisha. Trisha was a British show in the genre of what is known as tabloid talk shows, which many refer to simply as trash TV. This is a pretty controversial genre.
So how many times have you cheated?
Over 100.
And it really came from America in the 90s. It took the format of shows like Donahue, where people would talk about these social issues, but it kind of juiced it up with more drama, more arguments, more conflict. And we'd see a major rise in this genre with shows like Jerry Springer, Dr. Phil, Oprah.
Who the do you think you are?
No, whoa.
Where you would see these ridiculous episodes of people, racists, arguing with the race that they hated.
We don't need a melting pot in this country, folks. We need a salad bowl.
You'd have wives and husbands cheating, people being called liars.
I think you are extremely immature.
Really just showing the arse end of America, with episodes often ending in shouting matches and physical fights. The episodes continued to get more and more ridiculous, more and more absurd, and it was kind of clear that there was definitely some scripting going along.
And we went back to your house, and I slept with him in your bed.
You did.
However, jump over to the UK, and when we imported this genre, we had a problem, and that was a regulatory body called Ofcom. Ofcom have rules and regulations over what you can do on television, and one of those rules is that you can't knowingly deceive your audience into making them think that a scripted TV show is real life. So either you make it very apparent that the show is scripted and fake, or you do it for real. In steps the Jeremy Kyle Show.
You can be as good a father as you are envelope collector. The world will be a
Jeremy Kyle was here to shake things up. Jeremy was, to put it plainly, a prick.
Don't you think you should raise the bar a bit? I do.
Obviously, I never.
Don't you think that makes you look a bit disgusting?
Yeah.
And I don't think even he would disagree with me. That was kind of the point. Here's how the format of the show would go. You'd have these people that have done something terrible. Some episode titles include, I'll marry you if you prove you only cheated 16 times. I'll leave my boyfriend if he doesn't stop eating cereal. My boyfriend thinks I cheated with another man through a letterbox. The guests in this show were usually a bit unstable, very irritable, kind of unsavory.
And this is how you described yourself to my team. I'm super sperm.
Yep. I get everybody pregnant.
They would come on the TV show with their problem. Maybe the neighbour has stolen your dog for heroin money whilst they were sleeping with your wife. They would come on the show to hash it out in front of an audience who would react in real time, cheering, scoffing, booing, applauding. There would then be a couple of absolute units there to break it up when it inevitably turns into a fight. And then finally, you had Jeremy Kyle. Jezza would be just straight up shouting at the guests in their face.
What the hell do you expect me to do, you waste of space?
About how they're liars, scum, they're pathetic. He held nothing back, and it just came across as a total damnation of this guest.
Because you two are too damn selfish to work it out for your own. And now another one, 6 weeks old. I thought he was all in love. Since you came out, I don't know what to think. Why do you all keep having kids?
I think people thought, who is that cold bastard who will get some person and you go, shut up! Who are you to tell me?
There's 10 or 15 minutes. What do you want me to do? Sit there and mollycoddle them? At the end of the day, if you're beating people, you're taking drugs, you're drinking, what do you want me to do? It'll be all right. That's why they're in the position they are.
This show was meant to be a low point in the person's life. A rock bottom moment, if you will, where hopefully they would finally wake up and fix themselves. This approach was controversial, but it clearly resonated with the audience. The Jeremy Kyle Show was incredibly successful. It was one of the most watched daytime TV shows ever. It became a key part of British pop culture. There was endless parodies of the show.
But I know what you've done. I'm Jeremy Kyle. And you're scum! Both of you.
And to be honest, it's kind of a British expression to use the word Jeremy Kyle. If something very dramatic happened in someone's life, they might describe it as like an episode of Jeremy Kyle. But you see, after all the shouting and the fighting, the damnation, the show would then always stress how its objective was conflict resolution. They would say that they had extensive
Aftercare service that is the best that there's ever been on a talk show.
and that the goal was to bring meaningful change into an individual's life. And in some cases, it did work.
But if it wasn't for Jeremy Kyle, I wouldn't probably be alive.
But in others,
I have said that I will not comment on the tragic death of Steve Diamond.
it didn't. Before we go any further with this video, I want to give a massive shout out to Squarespace. Squarespace is the ultimate website building platform. It takes the hard technical knowledge of building a website with code and creates a very easy, simple to use platform so you can do it yourself, which is much cheaper, much quicker, and much easier. With tons of templates to choose from, you can pick them and perfectly customize them to fit what it is you do. As well, with tons of built-in tools like e-commerce, email marketing, appointment scheduling, Squarespace takes the hard work and makes it completely easy for you to do. Every time I've ever needed to make a website in the past, I've always used Squarespace. So be sure to check out squarespace.com/Jimmy the Giant, and to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain, use the code Jimmy the Giant. Anyway, back to the video.
It was sudden. There's lots behind what happened.
On the 2nd of May 2019, an episode of The Jeremy Kyle Show was recorded with a man called Steve Diamond. He was accused of having cheated on his wife Jane after she had found out that he was a compulsive liar, lying about a lot of things in his past. But Steve was adamant of his innocence, and he wanted to go onto the Jeremy Kyle to prove it with the ever so infamous lie detector.
But the lie detector was right, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
So you had cheated on Michelle.
The lie detector was like the main crescendo of the show. It was the big moment, you know, after denying the allegation that you had stolen the last of the milk out the fridge. Right at the end, the truth would finally come out.
This test says you were lying.
Oh, I wasn't lying, Jeremy, because that is Tisha, honest to God.
But there was a problem.
Can you just calm him down? She lied on every single question, including the sexual. Why'd you fail the test then?
Claims of how accurate lie detectors, aka polygraph tests, are wildly vary. ITV themselves claim that it's upwards of 90% accurate. The UK government considers them to be 80 to 90% accurate. However, it is very known that there can be false positives and that people can cheat them.
Anybody can pass any lie detector test by simply duplicating the physiological response to fear on demand at the appropriate time.
When this has not been done in a controlled environment, but someone who's away from their home, staying in a hotel in Media City, maybe on the day they're going to make a television programme and they're probably quite nervous and quite anxious about that, how likely is it, do you think, that they're going to give a calm, measured reading in that test?
Regardless, when the results came back of Steve Diamond's allegation, the Jeremy Kyle Show, of course, said that he was guilty. And tragically, just a week later, he was found dead from a deliberate morphine overdose. With his final messages to Jane being, "I hope the Jeremy Kyle Show is happy now. They are responsible for what happens now. I hope this makes good ratings for them. I bet they keep this quiet. Never, never, never did I cheat on you. Never, never." My final words.
My whole life for 14, 15 years was to the day, to the time, and suddenly that's all gone.
On the 15th of May 2019, it was announced that the Jeremy Kyle Show was cancelled by ITV. ITV had put out a press release saying that they would conduct an inquiry into the show. And when asked to attend, Jeremy Kyle refused.
When, and trust me, there will be a time after the inquest, when it is right and proper for me to have my say, because there are, of course, two sides to every single story, I will do it here, and I will do it to you.
Other members of ITV and the creators of the Jeremy Kyle Show did attend, attend, where they faced a grilling on the show and its duty of care on its participants.
That's not what your participants said, though. They said, effectively, that they don't feel as if there's any aftercare.
After the inquiry was done, the committee released a report saying that the Jeremy Kyle show exploited participants for entertainment.
Basically, it's a moment of drama. They storm off the stage, they're stopped by a person with a clipboard and a microphone in their ear, they're kept in camera, all the while their distress, when they think they're in a safer space, when they're achieving a safer space, their distress is there for people's entertainment.
Just after I got to the studios, me and my mum were separated into different rooms, and they spent the next 5 or 6 hours basically trying to really agitate me and wind me up, ready to go on stage.
After all this, as you would expect, a countrywide damnation of the Jeremy Kyle show happened, with the whole nation kind of just looking back and thinking, how was that allowed on air for so long?
You are one of the most disgusting people I've ever met in my entire life, and what I read about you would make any person with a brain cell recoil in horror.
But whilst all this was happening, Jeremy Kyle didn't say anything. In fact, it would be 2 years after this tragedy that Jeremy Kyle would break his silence, on the 6th of September 2021, in an interview with Talk TV titled, "I've Been Cancelled." During the 2 years of silence, it was reported that Jeremy Kyle didn't really leave the house.
You don't want to go out, curtains are shut, people are writing this, saying that.
So that's 2 years that Jeremy Kyle had to sit there, reflect, contemplate, and consider what had happened. And so you might be wondering, what was Jeremy Kyle's defense? Well, he pretty much said he was cancelled for having an opinion.
Listen, I've been cancelled. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, in a democracy, you should be able to ask and say what you want. If you don't like the response, you then throw your toys out of the pram.
This, I believe, was a very intentional move, considering the fact that he was appearing on this new network called Talk TV. It prides itself on this no-nonsense tone of voice, typically appearing to the kind of non-woke audience. And so this entire situation was used to announce that Jeremy Kyle was now a host on this network.
As you prepared to join the greatest radio station on the planet, right? And also the fastest growing one, by the way.
Quite right too. That's why I'm coming.
At just the right time.
Thank you.
Because you're going to turbo boost
timing. And look, I'm not judging the anti-woke leaning itself. However, to me, it feels pretty bad taste. This seemed like a PR move for Jeremy Kyle to expand his brand into this no-nonsense, straight-talking political pundit, who, as he put it, was cancelled for having an opinion, which just wasn't what had happened at all. And so as the years went on, the story was starting to die down. Jeremy Kyle was enjoying his new position, his new job, and then on the 13th and the 14th of March 2022, a bombshell would drop. Channel 4 would release their expose called The Jeremy Kyle Show: Death on Daytime. This documentary was brutal. It made the allegation that there was a toxic culture within ITV. They would imply that there was so much pressure on the crew to get guests that they would jump over the guidelines to get guests on, you know, checking their mental health properly. They would claim that off camera they would deliberately manipulate and poke at the guests to try and rile them up, to get them very angry.
And they spent the next 5 or 6 hours basically trying to really agitate me and wind me up.
They also claimed that many guests had their lives ruined because of this appearance, that many other people had also taken their own lives, they just hadn't made the big news. And the finger was really being pointed at the people who made the show, and of course Jeremy Kyle, who they described as this judgmental, scornful man with a god complex, who would look down on his guests with contempt. He would treat the crew poorly, shouting at them, degrading them, etc. ITV responded and of course denied these allegations. You know, whatever truly took place behind the scenes of the Jeremy Kyle show, we'll never know. But what we do know is, at best, it was morally questionable.
And what distressed me was the distress of the young man.
Hang on a second, look at me, look at me, look at me. Look at, did I mention you were a bad dad at all? Look at me.
Way before the Steve Diamond incident, in 2007 there was something that happened on the show whereby someone had headbutted another guest. It went to court, and as the judge delivered his sentence, he turned his attention to the Jeremy Kyle show, where he said the following: "It seems to me that the whole purpose of the Jeremy Kyle show is to effect a morbid and depressing display of dysfunctional people who are in some kind of turmoil." The judge also went on to call this bear baiting, and that the people responsible for this, namely the producers, should, in my opinion, be on the dock with you Mr. Staniforth. I think it's that comment on this being a human form of bear baiting that really hits the core of this whole saga. Because whatever we want to say about the producers, whatever we want to say about the guests, or Jeremy Kyle himself, we, as a nation, watched it. I watched it. Like, Jeremy Kyle wasn't the type of show you would choose to watch. You wouldn't wake up and go, oh, I can't wait to watch Jeremy Kyle. It was the kind of show when you were flicking through the channels, you would overhear someone screaming who had one tooth in their mouth and they were yelling about how they'd slept with someone's daughter or something.
My door ate him. My door.
It was impossible to look away. But why is that?
You cheat. Get away from me. You're cheating. Get away from me.
This show appeals to some of the darker parts of human psychology. It's that same morbid curiosity that makes it very hard to not look at a car crash. The part of us that revels in drama and gossip. When we sit there and watch other people struggling and having a bad time at life, there is a part of us that feels a kind of escapism from our own problems.
You're a waste of space. You don't support the kids. Yeah. You're nasty. You have a serious attitude problem. Yeah. I've got anger issues, yeah.
Like, yeah, my life might be tough, but at least I'm not on the Jeremy Kyle show. This was the real kicker for the Jeremy Kyle show. And look, it was undeniable. It definitely did help many, many people.
At a time when I was very vulnerable, he was the only person out there that stepped up and put me into rehab.
But I always felt that that was used as this moral saving grace for what was otherwise a privately educated man judging the socially outcasted underclass of society, their awful lives, their terrible situations, and all of this was done in the name of entertainment. And like, look, the guests weren't shining examples of morality. Obviously, that was the point of the show. They did terrible things that they are personally accountable for, but the problem was that the show felt like it took advantage of that and turned these people into a laughing stock.
And then the next night, wife number 2 comes.
Oh yeah, it's great lifestyle.
With this condescending, scornful tone, which never really offered much sympathy as to how they ended up in that situation in the first place.
And he starts saying, yeah, well, what about you and your marriage breakup, which we know has been in the papers and stuff.
Jeremy Kyle was no saint himself. He would talk himself about how he once had a gambling addiction.
I got myself into a position where I owed more than I'd got.
He had a brother who was addicted to coke. And newspapers would come out about the many hypocrisies of Jeremy Kyle, saying that he had 2 failed marriages, a cheating wife, he got engaged to his kid's nanny. Jeremy Kyle is just a human, as flawed as anyone else. But this whole story, this whole saga, gives us a reminder of a very important message. A message that is literally as old as the Bible, which comes from this story of a woman who had committed adultery. And she was moments away from being stoned to death by this very angry, judgmental mob.
In our law, Moses commanded that such a woman must be stoned to death.
As they scornfully looked down on this woman and her awful actions, they turned and asked Jesus, what should we do? To which he very simply said,
whichever one of you has committed no sin may throw the first stone at her.
And obviously, no one could. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel and watch this video right here.